I'm Cipriana Quann.
And I'm TK Quann.
And
we're the Quann sisters.
And
so a little bit about ourselves and our story. We're very close as sisters. We have a working relationship professionally and personally. So it's amazing to have this wonderful, supportive, and beautiful woman as not only a friend, but a business partner as well, and a confidant, someone I can wholeheartedly trust without hesitation.
And I think our bond is so close because not only are we like twins, but we're identical twins, and people are like a little bit surprised because we look different now. But I think the bond of being identical twin is that we were once one person that split into two. So
one egg.
Yeah, we were. So I describe it as like one person, one egg, but we were one person at one point in time. We split into two, and this bond is it's inseparable. I honestly can say today that I would not be the woman I am today, and I would not even be here in this world if I did not have this woman beside me.
I feel the exact same way. I have the exact same sentiments. We had a very difficult childhood growing up, and it was very helpful and a peace of mind to have someone in your corner, especially someone who was going through the same trial and tribulations as yourself. And I had that in my sister, and I had that in our incredibly amazing and beautiful mother.
Right. And as young girls growing up in a household that was abusive, so our father, he was physically abusive to us, and we experienced abuse multiple times a week for over a decade.
Yeah.
And it was not only abuse, it was very violent. And the abuse that we suffered, we were only able to survive through the strength of each other.
Yeah. So it was odd growing up as children and having this dichotomy of relationships that existed in our lives between our mom and dad, having this incredible and amazing woman as a mother who had no idea that we were going through this abuse, and then having an abusive father that had two sides to him. So it was almost like growing up with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, incredibly charismatic and talented and, smart, but having this very violent and dark side, and seeing this vitriol growing up was very difficult. But what I have to say was my saving grace was this woman. I know that for someone who's going through abuse, one of the most important factors you can have is to have someone that you can talk to. I think it's really important for people to understand that when people are going through difficult things in their lives, that you need to talk. You don't need to tell everyone, but you need to have one person who's supportive and in a positive way that can help you release these emotions and feelings, because a lot of times people go through abuse and they have no way to release it, and they harbor all these dark and difficult emotions to process, and it's very difficult to go through life harboring those emotions without some sort of positive release. So this was my release here, and always having someone that I knew that I could talk to, that would not judge me and would always listen.
Because in our household, the roles were reversed from what people think of as a stereotypical family back in the day. Our mom was the one that was working in the corporate field. She was working a 9 to 5 every day, while our father was at home taking care of us. So that was one of the reasons why she was also unaware. And, the abuse also goes beyond the physical. So it was mental abuse as well, where our father would threaten to kill us if we exposed him to our mother or to anyone.
Yeah.
So he was also training us as well, in a way, to stay quiet about the abuse. So the only way we could communicate about what was going on was with each other.
Yes.
And unfortunately, our father had a very hard upbringing. So our mother came from a very loving family, and our father did not. So our father suffered abuse in his life, and he was in and out of jail as a young man of color. So unfortunately, he passed on the suffering that he experienced onto the family, and he had a chance to make a change, but instead he repeated the trauma that he had and perpetrated it onto us. And we wanted to be the ones to break the pattern, and it wasn't something that we were aware that we survived until maybe a few years ago when we really start talking about and really understanding the depth of the abuse that we went through. And I mean, we actually would go to school with wounds, open wounds that our father inflicted on us, and we would cover it up, and he knew where to abuse us so it wouldn't show to others. And we deal with this for 10 years, like multiple times a week for over a decade. And I don't think we really thought about what we survived because we always had each other. So we kind of just...
Right. And the way that we processed it, I know the way I processed it after, you know, our mother divorced her father and we separated from that lifestyle of growing up in childhood. I knew that I always tried to minimize the abuse, like, oh, it's no big deal, and I didn't really think about it. But I knew in my own life I would get really upset at small things. You know, if I held the door open for someone didn't say thank you, because I'm from Maryland and we're all about manners, I would like blow up and get like really angry, but I would never take out anyone as far as like, you know, because sometimes people go through pain and they treat others in, you know, horrific or bitter ways because they're, you know,
they're still trying to heal.
Right. So they act out in certain ways. I never did that, but if, you know, I was taking up for myself or speaking up for myself, sometimes I would get like really angry or, you know, and I was trying to think like, why am I acting like this? And I realized it was because I hadn't processed the abuse. I was very angry at my father. I hadn't forgiven him. And I always tell people about forgiveness. Forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. Forgiving has to do with yourself and your own peace of mind. You don't need you don't need closure. You don't need someone else to say, I'm sorry, or, you know, for them to recognize their wrongdoings, because that's not what happened with our father. So you don't need that from the other person to receive closure. And I knew for me, I needed closure, and the way I could do that was to forgive my father. But that also doesn't mean that I should feel obligated to have this person in my life. I'm always a big believer that, you know, blood doesn't make family. How you treat others is what makes family. And I had no problem walking away from that pain and forgiving him. But once I did that, I saw my life change in new and beneficial and positive ways, and the way I looked at things and not allowing someone else's anger or attitude to affect the positive way that I felt about myself. That was a big game changer in my life.
And I think it's also really important when you go through that kind of trauma to recognize that it is okay that you can't do it by yourself. It is okay if you're still working through the trauma and the pain. If you haven't overcome it, I think the most important thing is to like really share with someone, especially if you need professional help.
Yeah, recognize when you need help.
Because I mean, that's part of the healing process. I think that's a big part of the healing process, is to recognize that you are still healing from trauma, or you're still trying to heal from trauma.
And there's strength in knowing when you need help.
Right. And I know for like exactly the reason why that I'm here today and the woman I am today is because of TK, because there were moments in my life where when I was younger as a teenager, I thought about suicide, and that was a real contemplation that I thought about. And I used to be ashamed to admit that. And it was just recently where I felt that there is no shame in surviving. There's a lot of strength, and there's a lot of strength in vulnerability and speaking your truth. And as I grow older, I realize that the trauma that you survived doesn't make you a victim. It makes you a warrior. And it changed my whole outlet in wanting to share our story to help other women, people in general that are going through a trauma that they're still coping with because they haven't released it yet.
And I realized too how lucky we are to have each other. I know a lot of people go through similar abuse and don't have anyone, or feel like they have anyone that they can talk to and connect with. And I understand how imperative and incredibly lucky I am to have always had that in my life. Because when Cipriana was talking about suicide, I felt the same way. And the only reason why I didn't do it is because I didn't want to leave my sister alone in abuse. And I think that I was born a twin for a reason. And I I know was beast, so I could survive. And it's interesting when people talk about abuse, and there's this kind of narrative that you have to speak about it, and if you don't speak about it within a certain time frame, then people question the validity or the truth of it. When women come out and talk about abuse like 5, 10, 20 years later, I was like, that has nothing to do with validation or believing a woman. A woman comes out in her own due time, and she's not obligated to talk about her truth within a certain time frame. Truth has no time frame, so a woman can talk about what she wants or her own abuse whenever she wants. And I feel like that's an important narrative that people should realize, that women and men who go through abuse, they're not on a time frame to share their story.
Right.
So I think that the one thing that we really want to share with people is that anyone who's gone through abuse of any sort, don't be afraid to share your story with someone that's supportive and that will listen to you and encourage you in positive ways. I think that sometimes people don't realize that the silence of keeping that abuse and harboring that abuse inside can be very unhealthy, and you may manifest it in ways that you might not even recognize. So I think that Cipriana and I would want women, men, girls, and boys, don't be afraid to share your story with someone who's going to listen and support you in a positive way.
And also to remember that if you have been abused, there is no shame in the abuse. Mm-hmm. You are a survivor. And I think we need to change the way that we look at people that we label as victims. They aren't victims. They survived something that was very horrific. And the abuse has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the abusee. All the pain and trauma that they suffered and that they couldn't overcome, they're now perpetrating it on you. Mm-hmm. So there is no shame in surviving the abuse from someone else.
Like the amazing Destiny Child said, I'm a survivor.
Yes.
I'm not going to give up. Yeah, so.